Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to Toe Tags Metal Reviews, and today we're giving you guys our first impressions of the new albums from Skeletal Remains, Exhorder, Sonata Arctica, Myrath, and Judas Priest. So a big 5-album day for metal for us here, and I'm just going to kick it off with Skeletal Remains. This is a death metal band that I haven't checked out before today. It's my first time checking out this band, so I wasn't sure. I mean, I saw the name Skeletal Remains. I'm like, okay, it sounds like it would be a death metal band. But I wasn't sure.
Just by name, yeah.
Until I pressed play, right? And at first, I was thinking, this reminds me of modern Cannibal Corpse. And that is a compliment because I like modern Cannibal Corpse a lot. I've given favorable reviews to their modern albums.
Yep.
And so it's a good thing in my eyes. One thing I noted early on, first track, it has this rad doubled guitar solo, which sounds totally awesome, but that was a pretty consistent note I was writing throughout this album. The guitar solo is just awesome. Cool solo, and that's probably the highest point of this album, is that the solos are great every single time I hear them. And it's like I even mentioned that with the second track. I'm like, wow, another rad solo in a row. And then there's this really cool scream that happens right after that solo. The way Conquer the Devout, the way that starts is really cool. The riff is nice, and the drums playing a role with the guitar strumming is cool as well. This track's got like 2 guitar solos, and it's like, cool, more. That's awesome. And one big thing that I really liked about this album is that it felt fresh. A lot of the times we check out a lot of death metal albums on this channel, it kind of feels like they just do their thing and that's it, and it's whatever. But it felt like there was interesting stuff for me to latch onto with this album, either in a small way or just in general, like, wow, this song's got cool riff, now this one's cool, and overall it felt like a strong album that way. For example, in terms of like the small stuff, they do this cool sequence in Forever and Sufferance. Well, they'll play in 4 for a few bars, and they'll end this phrase by playing a bar in 5, which is it's a really cool small mix-up that catches you off guard. It's like, oh, cool, they're doing this little interesting rhythmic phrasing, which I like, and I like when bands do that. And then there was another thing. It might have been in the same song, I'm not sure, but they're playing in 5, and then they go not long after that phrase into this cool double time section in 4/4, which is also really cool. So I like that they're doing neat little bits in their songs to keep things fresh.
Yeah, I'm not brand new to Skeletal Remains, but I'm not super in depth with them by any means. But I've listened to their other stuff before, and I've always thought they're a pretty cool band. But this album is definitely, in my opinion, the one that's kind of wowed me the most. I feel like they've definitely stepped up and kind of delivered a lot more creativity with this album. So, I put it on, I'm listening to it, and the first few songs, I'm like, okay, yeah, this is kind of like what I'm expecting. It's fine, it's good, I'm enjoying it. But it wasn't until like the second half of the album where the album started like catching a stride and really started kind of, catching my attention more. So from track 5 to track 9, basically, that stretch is super, super strong on this album. So track 5, Verminous Embodiment, just relentless and awesome stuff. Really cool solo, rad breakdown section. I was getting some In Sorte Diaboli vibes in the outro, which is kind of a weird kind of like, hey, what's that? Like just almost like genre crossover. Not exactly, but it's just interesting when one genre reminds you of a completely different genre, right? Just through a riff or a rhythmic section or something like that. I'm not exactly even sure what it was. But sticking with that, the track that comes after that, Ceremony of Impiety, is, or Impiety, I guess you'd pronounce it, is an interlude that reminded me a lot of Cradle of Filth. So another thing that reminded me of this like black metal-esque type of genre, which I thought was interesting. Moving forward from that, you got Void of Despair, just brutal, heavy, sick double bass, sick riffs, solos on point, just everything you want from a song like this. Then, probably the most impressive one out of this sections is track number 8, Unmerciful. It's 7 minutes and 10 seconds long, which is pretty long for a song of this genre, but it works.
Yeah.
The transitions blend nicely into each other. The song's got nice flow. It doesn't stale out, right? And that's something that's like really impressive for a genre like this, to have a song that long and have it be entertaining through the whole thing. And after that, you have an instrumental, right?
I wasn't expecting that.
Which is 5.5 minutes long and also pretty awesome. So overall, great album. It's 10 tracks, 45 minutes long, good stuff. Definitely strongest on the second half, but I'm definitely gonna revisit the first half again. Maybe I missed some stuff or I wasn't quite focused in. But yeah, good stuff from Skeletal Remains.
Nice. So moving on, let's talk about Karma by Myrath.
Okay.
Here's the thing with this band. I'm glad that we're finally covering this band on the channel. We've never covered them before. When I was first getting into a lot of metal, which was mainly rooted in prog, this was one of the bands I latched onto, and I listened to their first 2 records, and I'm like, oh, these guys are incredible. And I even more recently, to prepare myself for this release, listened to their first album again just to see if I could remember it, and it blew me away all over again. And there's a lot of stuff I remembered, like, oh, it's all coming back to me, how awesome these guys are. And with how this album started, I'm like, you know, the bass tone is really, really pretty, and the cool syncopation in the verses of To the Stars is neat. But as the album went on, I started to think, well, this band is playing a lot more grounded than I'm used to. And I feel like they're not really doing like any crazy, cool, prog, madness, wild stuff anymore. But then as I went, it started to kind of feel like they were repeating themselves on this record.
Almost like they're playing it safe.
It's just, you know what, they kind of were. Yeah, it kind of felt like they were just doing some... The instrumentation of this album is really cool. They still have that Eastern influence and it sounds really nice.
Middle Eastern, yeah.
But it's just like kind of straightforward stuff, predictable key changes, stuff like that. And I'm like, what happened? It kind of feels like they took some venom out of the snake with this release, you know?
Yeah.
And there are some bridges here and there, like the bridge in Wheel of Time, that's a bit closer to what I really know this band can do. And the bridge in Child of Prophecy is another one. But overall, like, not only does it feel like they played things super ultra safe with this record, but they also like didn't really have much of a contour. Every song was kind of accomplishing the same thing. There wasn't really much variety as when it comes to these songs. There wasn't really much of a journey or a roller coaster or much of an adventure. It kind of just felt like, here's a bunch of songs that kind of do the same thing and that's it. And yeah. I was really disappointed because I'm like, I know what this band's capable of. What happened here? You know, so I mean, bands can experiment, they can do whatever they want, right? It's always, in terms of, you know, your audience, it's always a risk you're gonna take if you're gonna experiment as a band. Some people are gonna like it, some people aren't gonna like it. Some people are gonna like what they already know you for, some people are gonna be glad with the change.
You consider this experimenting or just kind of
I mean, based on what I know from this band, it kind of is. Because I'm used to them doing like all this crazy syncopated progressive stuff, super duper long songs.
Okay.
Like I'm used to that, you know, from this band, but this wasn't that. And while I can respect that they've done something different, at the same time, I just wasn't into it. So it was a bit of a disappointment for me, unfortunately.
Yeah, it almost seems like Myrath is going for a more accessible route with this album. I'm not well versed in this band, definitely not as much as TV Fish. When I put this album on, I was like, you know, I know what this band sounds like. I know kind of what I'm getting into. And I thought the first few songs were pretty good. I was like, okay, I'm in for a good ride here. But as TV Fish mentioned, yeah, the songs do stale out quite a bit. And they do start kind of sounding like they're kind of just repeating the same ideas and same things. And nothing really deviates too far from where it was originally. Which is a shame because you want an album like this to have a lot of contour and a lot of character. I definitely think there's some strong points on the album. Like, I guess I'll just talk about the song that I thought stood out the most out of the 11 tracks. Is track number 2, Into the Light. I thought was the strongest track. I really like the leads. They're very bright sounding. The vocals are really good. Some of the background parts were giving me Kashmir vibes. And I really like the instrumentation usage with the horns. There's fantastic piano work. There's just a lot of really good ideas. And they're gelling very well together on this track. Now, every track has a lot of these ideas. But that's part of the problem, is that they're just going, okay, we're going to do it again in this track, we're going to do it again in that track. You do get deviations here and there. Like in Temple Walls, for example, track number 7, that one's got a lot more of the Middle Eastern flavor to it, right? You know, you got songs like Wheel of Time, where there's a little bit more of the high vocals, right? Falsetto style vocals. So there's a little bit here and there, but I guess for both of us, just not enough, especially considering what this band's capable of. and the talent that we know that they possess, there could have been a lot more here, we feel. So that's a little bit disappointing. But still, I didn't think it was horrible.
That's fair. Well, moving on, let's talk about Defectum Omnium by Exhorder. Okay. This is a band that was around in the early 90s, stopped, and then came back, and they've been making some albums in the late 2010s into the 2020s. This was the first time I've heard this band, though, so I wasn't exactly sure what I was getting into, but as I'm listening, I'm like, wow, this is certainly an experience for sure. Now, first thing I noted was about the sound of this singer. Now, he reminded me of a lot of different singers put together, but a few that I wrote down that were notable to me that I could hear throughout this album were Devin Townsend, Chuck Billy, and Russell Allen. That's an incredible combination of singers to be compared to.
Yeah,
to sound like a mix of those three guys is a huge compliment.
Surprised you didn't say Phil Anselmo, because that's who it reminds me of a bit.
I suppose I could kind of see. I mean, it
didn't click with you that way, huh?
Maybe it just didn't, but on another listen, maybe I would hear it.
Maybe.
I only heard the album one time so far. So when, I was first listening, I'm like, this is like very thrashy, but very groovy, which I guess makes sense if you heard Phil, that's kind of generally what Pantera did as well.
Pretty much, yeah, thrash and groove, yeah.
But what I really liked is that it has a lot of really thrashy stuff, but then it incorporates melodic stuff on top of that, especially with the vocal lines, which makes the songs stand out a little more, because we've seen plenty of thrash albums that kind of do one thing over and over, and they do that thing amazingly, but it's just hard to differentiate some of the songs sometimes. Mm-hmm. But then you've got some songs that really lean even harder and go into like punk territory, which I thought was super duper cool. One of the examples of that was Forever and Beyond Despair. That was a really cool one. And then you got a song like The Tale of Unsound Minds. This song went straight into my playlist. It's the slow burner. Love the riff. To me, it sounded like with this slow section, it sounded like a really metal version of old school Alice in Chains. Like Lane era Alice in Chains. That, but harder.
Huh.
And I thought that was super duper awesome. I love Alice in Chains, so it totally played to my ears really nicely. But then in the second half, it just kicks into gear with this solo. I'm like, whoa, okay, I wasn't ready for that. And that was super duper cool. Then you got a song like Year of the Goat. That's where the Russell Allen comparison came for me. Okay. I'm listening to that song, I'm like, this sounds like a less technical version of Symphony X. Like, what the heck is going on? With all this other stuff that I've heard earlier, like this album's got so much going for it. And I thought it was really, really cool. So what they did is throughout the album, it's kind of just shifting between a bunch of different things, and there's a lot of ideas throughout this album, and I think that's awesome. And I think that's the kind of thing that makes your album stay. I feel like it's the kind of thing that makes people want to come back to your album, because you're like, wow, there's so many cool different things going on. They're all executed very well. Really, really cool sounding stuff. Like overall, I enjoyed this album quite a bit, and it's my first impression of this band, so now I got to go listen to the other records, because this one was awesome.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Exhorder's been around for a while. They've changed their sound a tad over the years. I'm pretty sure they started off as just a pure thrash band and kind of started incorporating a lot more of the groove and heavy metal elements as the years went on. But yeah, similarly, like I've heard this band before, but this is my first time diving into an album. So, I put it on, and similarly to Skeletal Remains, I'm liking it, but I wasn't like super blown away until the second half. The second half for me was a lot stronger. Other than track number 3, Forever and Beyond Despair, which you already mentioned, had that punky feel, the D beat and all that stuff. That one really kind of stood out as far as the first half. After that, it's track 6, 8, 10, and 12. Just the even numbers of the second half were the highlights for me. So track 6 is Year of the Goat. I thought this was a really cool song. One thing he says at the beginning, he says, in the year of the goat, I am the ram. What does that mean? Like, I don't know. I didn't know what that meant. I was like, that's an odd lyric. I don't know. It probably means something. But track number 8, Defectum Omnium / Stolen Hope. So I guess it's 2 songs in one kind of thing.
Yeah.
This is a 7-minute and 13-second long song, which is also very similar to Skeletal Remains, which had a 7.5-minute long song around the same part of the album too.
Yeah.
So this song, I felt like they were really going for a Black Sabbath vibe. I'm talking about the song, not the band. right? But I feel like it missed the mark, if that's what they were going for. Like, I was getting that vibe, but I was also going, it's not quite there yet, right? But then it turns into like basically a Pantera song. So I'm like, okay, that's a pretty cool transition. I was getting a lot of Pantera vibes from this. You mentioned a few other vocalists, and I'm not just talking about vocally, I'm talking about musically as well, but that's obviously fitting, because genre-wise, they're very similar. Genre buddies. Sedition, track number 10, I really like the attack of this song. Really intense. I also like how it fluctuates in its intensity. So you're getting a bit of contour in the song, and you're not getting something that just rides one wave through the whole thing and then it ends. So you're getting a little bit of this, which is something we're always after. And then track number 12, which is the last track. I'm not sure about it as a closer, but it's a good track. I was a little bit like, it's gonna take me a few more listens to like understand what's a good closer or whatever, but when I first listened to it, I was like, this doesn't really sound like a good closer. But what I did like about it is the vocals, because you have some falsettos in there, which I really like. So there, in the middle of the song, there's a falsetto, and then towards the end of the song, there's a few more. I like falsettos. I've always liked falsettos. So yeah, overall, I thought this was a strong album. It's almost an hour long, which is also pretty long for an album of this style. But yeah, good stuff. Definitely, I felt like stronger in the second half, like I said, but the whole album was still pretty enjoyable.
So moving on, let's talk about Clear Cold Beyond by Sonata Arctica. The album's finally here. We've had, it's unfortunate that we've had the opinions that we've had on this band with the other times we've covered them on the channel, because
Tavio.
We reviewed Tavio back in 2019. Neither of us liked it. We felt that the band just kind of lost their character with that album.
Yeah.
And then we heard Only a Monster, Only You Can't See. We reacted to that. We weren't huge on that either, but then we didn't react, but we did check out the other singles, or at least one of the other singles from this album, and it was more in line with what we know and like from this band. And it's, you know, to comment on that, it's another case of like, yeah, a band can experiment, a band can do different things. If you want what you know the band for, then that's what you want, right? You can respect them for trying something different. If it worked for you, great. If it didn't work for you, then that sucks, and you can only just hope to yourself that I hope the band does something more than what I like, just for our enjoyment. But this album, I felt like, was definitely a step in the right direction after that last record. I feel like they found their character again, and I did find that in some of these tracks there were some cool, interesting intricacies that I liked as well. And I do remember hearing the first track when it was a single, and I liked that alone. First, it's called First in Line. It wasn't really mind-blowing, but generally cool. But what is cool is that California just instantly cranks the speed knob up as soon as First in Line ends, which I think is kind of funny. But that a song like that is the soul that I feel like this band was missing for a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, it feels like that. This is what I love Sonata Arctica for. Is the album as good as their peak? No, but I still enjoyed it. Shah Mat. That's another song that I liked. It starts with this really cool synth, has this piano line on top of it, builds up into a faster track. Like that song I generally enjoyed. So to comment on A Monster Only You Can't See, which was the single we reacted to, I feel like it fits a lot better in context of the album. I think having that, honestly, I don't even think it should have been a single.
That's one of my notes. Horrible choice for a single.
But I'm pretty sure it wasn't the first. I think First in Line may have come out before it. I'm not sure. I feel like...
It doesn't matter what was first or not. It was still a horrible choice to say, hey, this is our album that's coming out.
That's reasonable, yeah. In general, maybe they shouldn't have chosen it as a single.
Yeah.
But I think it's easier to listen to when it's the mid-album break, because a lot of the tracks before it are a lot higher on energy, so it's reasonable to have it here. I still think the parts where Tony Kakko goes, asshole, sounds weird and out of place, but I guess
cringy, but it's funny.
He's just goofing around with it, I guess. So it's like, okay, that's fine. It's just, what? Teardrops is an interesting one that has the energy, but it's a bit slower, so it doesn't really blend in with the other faster tracks, and I liked that. So, you know, it wasn't an album that really blew me away, but overall, I generally enjoyed it, and I'm glad that for me and my enjoyment that this band is back on track with the character that I know and love from them, and I can just hope that in the future they continue to, you know, refine update and really relish in this character that they have.
Yeah, this is a band that, man, I find like when this band came out, like Ecliptica, Silence, Witch of Hearts Guild, like that to me is pinnacle. Like that's peak power metal. And
Some of the best out there.
For a band to come out and have a 3-album run that strong is like almost unheard of. But this band's also a perfect example of from the pinnacle to the pit, a fall from grace. Because since then, they have not put out anything that matches the caliber of their first 3 albums.
Well, I mean, they've had some good stuff after those 3.
There's stuff sprinkled in, but I'm talking about full solid albums that are as good. There's like a decent song or 2 on every album, I would say. But albums being as strong as those, nah, man. For me, it's few and far between. This is probably the closest they've come to that, to the glory days, at least from my recollection. When I put this album on, I'd say the first 3 to 4 songs, I'm going, wow, this definitely feels like a return to form. Like this, they're definitely not trying whatever they did in Talvio, which I want to forget about. They're not doing that anymore. So I'm pleased, I'm happy, but none of the songs are really doing it for me still. And I start wondering, like, how would I feel if I was listening to this album at a time when Sonata Arctica was on my regular rotation? Right? Because that was a while ago when I was really, really into them. So did my taste just change, or is it just not as strong as it used to be? That's kind of the battle I'm having with this. I still think it's good, but again, you listen to some of the older stuff and I'm like, oh yeah, instant classic, instant hit, right? But maybe it's just because I'm familiar with that stuff. So it's hard to really say. Some of the songs, so I'll talk about a couple songs that I liked. So California, I think you mentioned California already. That's a really strong song, track number 2. But towards the end of the album, I thought Angel Defiled was also really strong too. The intro's really good. It's kind of got a mid/high tempo rhythm going.
Had a good vocal performance.
And the vocal performance is always good.
He's got a great voice.
Sometimes it stands out more than others on certain songs. But Angel Defiled has that hook factor, right? Where it's just catchy. You just want to put it on again. You want to crank it up a bit. And that's one thing that I miss from this band, because that's one thing that those first 3 albums did have, a lot of really catchy stuff, whether it's vocal performance or riffs. It's just stuff that makes you go, that sounds good, that stands out, I want to hear that again, it's going in the playlist, like that's the kind of stuff I want. So I think on my first impression, this album was definitely a lot better than I was expecting, based on the singles. And I got to spend more time with it to really find out where exactly it fits. But I think there's a lot of potential there, and I think that there's definitely some strong stuff there. As far as weak stuff goes, I didn't really notice anything that was super bad, but there was a few songs that really just came and went, right? But those are the songs, maybe give them another chance, listen to them on different headphones or stereo systems or whatever, and get a different feel for it. And they might kind of crawl up the ladder and start growing on you a bit. So overall, pretty good, better than I thought, but not exactly where I wanted it to be. Let's just say that.
And now the moment you've been waiting for.
Ooh.
Invincible Shield by Judas Priest.
Okay.
Now, funny thing I read today about this album is that this album's release marks the first metal band to ever release albums 50 years apart.
Wow.
Rock-a-Rolla came out in 1974, and here we are in 2024 checking out new Judas Priest.
Wow.
So we checked out 3 singles from this album. They all sounded quite different from each other. And we got a bit of a mixed bag in terms of our enjoyment of them. So I wasn't really not sure where this album was going to go, like coming in. I thought like, well, it has a mix of good stuff and mix of stuff I'm not huge on, so I really don't know what it's going to be like. But Panic Attack is the first track, and we did react to that song. Still a great track, great opener. That part in the bridge before the first solo is just straight out of Tom Sawyer. It still is, which is pretty funny. But one cool thing about this song, and I want to say we even mentioned this in the reaction, they play like the head out, like they play the chorus out, and then like, nope, it's not the end. Here's another solo, and then we end the track. Like, oh, there's more. Which I thought was really cool. The Serpent and the King has the energy to it as well. I really, really like that song, and I was kind of concerned after the other two singles, like, is this album not going to have too much in terms of the energy from this band? But that is just not true. This album does have that. The Sermon of the King is another good one. The title track, also a cool song, and I like the vocal layering of high vocals and lower vocals, and then it kind of like it's more focused on the lower register vocals and then the highs in the background, and then it flips.
I didn't know
as
that.
it goes. I'm like, oh, that's cool. It focuses more on the highs. So it's like, you know, from that point, I'm like, this album's 3 for 3 on the cool songs. In Devil in Disguise, I got a little bit of flashbacks when I heard him say frantic, tick, tick, tick. I got the flashback.
Did he say that? I didn't catch that.
It's frantic, and then it echoes tick, 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 tick.
No.
And I'm like, no, Xavier, not again. So I thought that was pretty funny.
That is pretty funny. I didn't even catch that.
It was a slower song, breaking up the action, and the pre-chorus is a bit more melodic than I thought it would be, but I enjoy it. I don't know about you, but on the choruses, you could kind of sing Leather Rebel on it.
I could see that, yeah.
But it's like slower than Leather Rebel, but I just thought that was interesting. You could put that on top.
Yep.
So regarding Crown of Horns, which is a song that we weren't really huge on when we reacted to it,
right?
I think it's fine as a mid-album break. I just kind of wish there was a more crazier song before it, so it felt like more of a proper break. But as God Is My Witness is a good kind of blazer to kick off the second half after that break, so I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Trial by Fire was a cool song when we checked it out in the reaction, but I liked it a lot more after hearing it on the album. Like, this is really, really nice, and it works better in context of the album.
Yeah.
One small thing I noticed as well, some of the vocal effects on Escape from Reality really sounded like some Black Sabbath vocal effects. I don't know about you, but that's the vibe I got from that, in that song.
In Trial by Fire?
No, in Escape from Reality.
Yeah, I mean, definitely sounded like Ozzy in some of the vocals. Like,
exactly,
I actually was listening, I go, is Ozzy on this song? And I looked it up, I'm like, he's not, but it definitely sounds like he's on here.
The vocal effects really sounded like that. I'm thinking,
yeah, sounds like Ozzy singing, it really does. Yeah, you know what, you said a lot of the things like that I had notes for already, so I guess we're kind of on the same page here. Invincible Shield, like the song, track number 3, I felt like it reminded me of Ram It Down, which is one of my favorite Judas Priest songs, particularly because of the solo. So I'm waiting for the solo to come up on the song to see if it lives up to it. And it's good, but it's not Ram It Down good. I mean, that's a really hard solo to beat as far as my tastes go. But it's still a really good song. Gates of Hell, one of the first lyrics, he pronounces purgatory like purgatory, and that bugs me. He just pronounces it like that to make it rhyme and fit with the rest of the lyrics. Purgatory. Yeah, awkward. But anyways, the solo has a really great tone in this song, which is another thing I like when they play around with the tones and stuff like that and give you a little bit of a different feel, a different vibe, instead of them all sounding the same. Yeah, you mentioned Crown of Horns already. We didn't really like this when we reacted. Hearing on the album is a bit better, but I find the song too long. And I think the whole Call Out to the World Tonight part is like kind of like it's like a bridge, and then there was a solo bridge after that. But it's like, Call Out to the World Tonight, blah, 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 blah. He just says a bunch of stupid shit. Cut that part out. It's lame. I thought it was so stupid. Cut it out. That's what ruins the song, really. It pads it, the length, and it's also cringy. So that could have been cut out, and it might have been a pretty decent song as far as the mid-album breather, slow song, whatever. But yeah, you got As God Is My Witness right after that, and that's good Judas Priest stuff right there. That's where they pick it back up and they redeem themselves right away, so good on them for that. Trial by Fire, you hit the nail on the head. Reacting to it, it was all right. Hearing it on the album, way better.
Yeah.
Fits in way better. And we mention this all the time when we do reactions. It all depends how it sounds in the context of the album.
Yep.
This is a perfect example of that. Because if you watch our reaction, we're probably like enjoying it, but like kind of like, it was good, but
yeah. It was good, it was solid, but it wasn't mind-blowing. But
Yeah.
on the record, it's way better.
Because it fits. It doesn't sound really like anything else, but it has its place.
Exactly.
Right?
And that's why it's important to consider, like, you can listen to songs in a vacuum, and in some cases, the songs are better that way. But in other cases, they're better as a unit together on the record as a full album experience.
Exactly.
And this one did a good job.
Yeah. So for the record, just want to point this out too, that if you look on Spotify, it's the deluxe version, but the album is actually only 11 tracks, so we're only talking about 11 tracks. The rest are bonus deluxe songs. So the album actually ends at Giants in the Sky, which is also a pretty cool song.
It was.
But yeah, out of those 11 tracks, you got 52 minutes of playtime. I thought it was pretty good. Is it as strong as the last album? I'm not sure. Maybe it's stronger. Not sure. But we're going to find out, because we're going to review this album for the week, and we'll be back in a whole week to give you guys our full and final review of Invincible Shield. But for now, leave your thoughts down below and let us know what you guys think of this album and all the other albums we covered today. And subscribe if you guys are new to the channel. I'm Vile Self.
I'm TV Fish.
And we'll see you guys in the next one.